Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Cabinet meeting of the 21st of February 2024. I'm obliged to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded, and can I also remind members to please identify your name and role when speaking so that it's clear to those watching the meeting who is actually doing the talking. Members, I'm going to, Chairman's prerogative I suppose, I'm actually going to change the order of the agenda somewhat. Because when I first received the agenda, I realised that the 24-25 information actually came before the 23-24 information, which didn't make an awful lot of sense to me. So we'll take the scrutiny item and then go to the 23-24 items, and then the 24-25, and then back to the normal order. I will read out the numbers of the items we're dealing with so that we are all very clear. So item number 1, apologies for absence. We have apologies from Tanya Miles, Director of People, who's unfortunately unwell today. Item number 2, disclosable interests. Is there any interests for anybody to disclose this morning? Okay, moving on. Item number 3, minutes of the meeting. I'm happy to propose. Do I have a seconder for those?
Councillor Ian Nevins, Deputy Leader. I'll second.
Thank you very much indeed. All those in favour? Thank you. Moving on to item number 4, which is public question time. We don't have any public questions today, but we do have 3 member questions. So the first question is from Councillor Julian Dean. Julian.
Thank you. This is in 2 parts, and I see the answer is in 2 parts as well, so I'll deal with it in that way. So the first part, Shropshire Council agreed 2 motions in recent years setting out ways for planners to promote better outcomes on travel and sewage and river health. In May 22, a motion agreed to promote transport for new homes, guidance to developers, and to ask questions regarding sustainable transport. Specifically, what measures have been or will be taken to limit car dependency and to maximise opportunities for the take-up of active travel and public transport? What measures have been or will be taken to ensure connectivity and access to services and to opportunities for work, rest and play within distances reachable by walking, wheeling or cycling?
Thank you, Councillor Dean. Councillor Chris Schofield, Portfolio Holder for Planning and Regulatory Services. If we take the individual bits. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you for your question, Councillor Dean. This work forms part of our spatial strategy contained within the draft local plan and our emerging local transport plan 4 strategy, which is due to be presented for adoption later this year. The LTP has been delayed pending further government guidance. The local plan is due for formal adoption within the next 12 months, and the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan is imminent.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Dean, second part of your question.
The second question is, in March 23, Council agreed planners should ask Severn Trent Water from this date onwards in its planning consultation responses for major development to clarify which treatment works will be managing the sewage, whether it has the information available to assess the impact on the number or duration of sewage discharges into local rivers, and if it does have this information, to share it, noting that this can only be requested, not required, and to consider requiring as condition for support that Grampian conditions are applied to allow time for upgrades in wastewater systems to be completed where appropriate. In a recent planning meeting, it became evident that at least one of these requirements was unknown to case officers. That refers to both questions, really. So I'll just ask the last bit. So how were these motions followed up? In how many planning application cases have the relevant inquiries been made? How have these inquiries impacted planning outcomes or officer reports?
Thank you, Councillor Dean. Councillor Chris Schofield.
The Council has entered into a statement of common ground with Severn Trent Water as part of the local plan process regarding the delivery of the proposed allocated sites and overall quantum of growth proposed. On some sites and settlements, this will show that there is likely to be a need for upgrades for existing works to accommodate growth, and this should then inform their capital investment programme, which we understand is currently sitting with Ofwat for approval. In terms of the consultation process on major planning applications, this formed part of a detailed set of wider actions within the motion, most of which we have picked up as part of the recent Scrutiny Committee review on this topic.
Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Dean?
Yes, thank you very much. So my understanding from that answer is that, in fact, there's no evidence that we've actually done either of the things that we agreed to do. The questions around transport, which were specific questions which should be asked in current developments, have all been pushed down the line to be part of the local plan or the LTP4, and that the questions around sewage have been, again, rolled into something else and are being looked at in scrutiny, whereas the council made a very specific commitment that we need to start asking these questions in order to protect our water. So my question is, can we have assurance that from now on, given that council has made very specific commitments, that these will be implemented? And also, the final part of my question hasn't been answered, so can we have evidence as to whether these have not been asked, not been used, and if not, why not?
Chris? Mark Barrow?
Thank you. One of the things to perhaps understand is that at any one point in time, there's probably about 18,000 outstanding plan applications that, have been given planning that need time to work through the system. Now, of course, in terms of when they come forward and all those previous permissions and all those previous conditions that were set around them, of course, it takes time to work through the system. I think the reassurance we can give is that, from the date of the decisions, that's when we've been kind of working then with Severn Trent and others, particularly to address those kind of key concerns. So I think the reassurance is that there are actions in play. As you can see, there's a statement of common ground there with Severn Trent particularly, and bringing together all of the transport issues in the first part of the question is part of the local transport plan that has been also discussed at scrutiny. So just to give Councillor Dean a reassurance, we are alive to it, we are working on it, we are working with what's in the system, and you'll recall there's a much wider range of recommendations in both of those motions as well, and all of those are progressing well too, Leader.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Moving on to the next question, Councillor Andy Boddington, who's joining us online. Good morning, Andy.
Good morning. Okay. My question is about play areas. How often does Shropshire Council inspect the safety of the play areas it is responsible for?
Do you want us to answer these individually?
I think it's easier.
Yep, okay. Councillor Morris?
Thanks, Dan Morris, portfolio holder for Highways and Infrastructure. Every 2 weeks.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Boddington?
Does Shropshire Council engage ROSPA or any other safety body to conduct annual reviews of its play areas?
Councillor Morris?
Yes, and I can answer question 3 as well. There is a ROSPA safety manual which I can forward on to Councillor Boddington.
Okay, thank you very much. And I believe that you will have an attachment, Councillor Boddington, about the annual reviews of play areas. So that takes us on to question number 4.
When is the Tollgate Lane area going to be repaired and made safe for our children in our community that play there?
Councillor Morris?
Quotes have been sought for permanent repairs to the play area, but costs of around £25,000 are prohibitive in the current financial climate. It is recognised that the condition of the existing fencing is unacceptable, and damaged sections will be removed, made safe, and temporary repairs instigated so that children can play safely. This will be undertaken shortly.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Boddington?
No, only it's almost a statement. I mean, it's been 3 months and it's actually quite dangerous in rain like this. I mean, kids are still playing in rain because they're kids. But it's quite difficult to get on the site safely. If you're going to move the fences shortly, could you do it immediately? As soon as you can get people on site, like tomorrow?
Councillor Morris?
In the answer I said this will be undertaken shortly, but I will specifically pick this up with the relevant officer after the meeting.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Councillor Boddington. And finally, the third question comes from Councillor David Vesman. David, would you like to come to the table? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, in the report presented by Councillor Rob Macy at the call-in meeting of the Economy and Environment Scrutiny Committee on Friday the 9th of February, a commitment about the future of the quarry pool in Shrewsbury was confirmed as follows. This is a quote. The Cabinet report was clear that a decision on the future of the quarry has not been made, and the recommendations were explicit in committing to undertake an assessment of future options in the quarry in due course. Would the portfolio holder for Cultural and Digital, Councillor Rob Macy, give a commitment to the public of Shrewsbury that the options to be considered will only be swimming and fitness ones, and that the option of selling the quarry site will not be considered?
Thank you, Councillor Basma. Councillor Rob Macy.
Councillor Robert Macy, portfolio holder for Culture and Digital. Thank you, Councillor Vatsma, for your question. As you point out in the preamble, the Council, through myself, the leader and officers, has been quite clear that no decisions have been taken on the quarry site. We've also been equally clear that we've committed to undertaking an assessment of future options for the quarry site in due course, as laid out previously. Therefore, without judgment of these or any future requests, I'll not be making any further commitments on the subject. To do so risks giving the public the impression that decisions, even in the form of commitments, are or have been made, which would not be fair given the previous statements from myself and the Council on this matter.
Thank you, Councillor Macy. Councillor Basma, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I think a lot of people within Shrewsbury are worried that the quarry pool will be closed and the land will be sold. And I wondered if you're not willing to kind of rule out that option at all.
I refer you to my previous answer.
There might be some around this table, Councillor Basma, who said if certain people stopped spinning the fact that the site was going to close, that wouldn't be the case. We have made no decision. I'll reiterate that once again. Thank you very much indeed. Briefing in healthcare going to be led through by, Councillor Cecilia Motley. I'm just saying your email, Heather. Councillor Motley.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is Cecilia Motley, Adult Social Care and Public Health Cabinet Member. We agreed that this report should come back to Cabinet to respond to the recommendations. There were quite a lot of recommendations in the Task and Finish Group report, 14 in all. And so this report sets out the response and prioritisation of recommendations within the report. And you'll notice that we have, from the print that is outlined in blue, that we have actually adopted or are in the process of adopting 5 at the moment, because we can do these in the fairly short term. 6 to 12 months delivery, we reckon we can deliver these by. The first one is obviously most welcome, which is adopting the Rural Proofing for Health toolkit. Then the next one, the impact of digitalisation on protected and vulnerable demographics. We absolutely accept that this is necessary, but we felt that it would actually be more powerful if we took this forward in partnership with the new Digital Inclusion Network. So it's requested that the joint chairs of the network consider this inclusion in their action plan and their meetings. Then there is the issue of coordinating intelligence and data gathering and how it can contribute to discussion and research, and testing the strategic plans and how they strengthen the power of the community. We feel that this is most appropriately taken through the joint strategic needs assessment process. We're constantly working, as you know, and at a very local level, Heather, on the joint strategic needs process. And what we're really keen to try and get is a more localised understanding of need and intelligence gathering, which is then going to feed into the new community hubs that are being set up. So we're working with our health colleagues on this. Moving on to the third, maybe it's the fourth. This group has focused on rural proofing specifically, but obviously they found that the impact is much wider ranging and relevant to all areas of council. and they would like the Shropshire Council 2020 Community and Rural Strategy, which actually I worked on with Gwilym Butler, so I'm well aware of that. And I agree with you that this should be updated, absolutely. Excuse me, I've just lost my place. Just a little bit tiresome. It's all right, found it again. And then the rural proofing for health toolkit be recommended for use with the marches forward. I think this is a very sound idea. The only slight worry I have about this is that we can recommend it to the Marches Forward Partnership, but we just need to remember that the body that produced the toolkit actually works in England, and I'm not sure whether it works in Wales. However, I mean, I think we can leave that with the Marches Partnership to work out. Then we've got another one which we are looking at on, as it were, the medium term, which is the Mental Health Commissioner role, and that has actually been appointed to, as I think you know. Now, I did have a letter from the chair of this group, from Jeff Elner, who was keen that we should actually be able to sign off on all of these. But we feel that due to the situation at the moment, that we would rather do them, as it were, in bite-sized chunks, rather than trying to tackle 12 at once. Or it's actually 10 at once at the moment, which particularly apply to Shropshire Council. And I will be responding to Jeff along those lines, that we'd rather do them so, in a way in which we can actually achieve them well, so that they actually, meet their requirements. So the other thing that we're very keen to do is make sure that this keeps going back to HOSC, so that it goes back to HOSC on a 6-monthly basis. So I think you'll find this will not disappear. I think Jeff's worry was that half the recommendations would be lost in the wash, as it were, but I can assure you that that's not going to happen.
Thank you very much, Cecilia. And just to give a slight bit of update, I have a meeting with the lead authority for health in the Marches Forward Partnership, where we'll be asking that very question around whether the rural proofing kit, because I think my view is there's no reason why they couldn't adopt it. It's just persuading them to do so. I'm sure I won't have any problems with the leader trying to persuade her to adopt it. It's the overarching umbrella, if that makes sense, Councillor Hidd.
Thank you, Leslie. I think where Jeff and I were both coming from was the 6 to 12 months is quite explicit, and we know exactly. It's when it's in 12 months plus, it seems to disappear off over the horizon. And so thank you for reassuring me with that, and I'm sure the minutes will pick up exactly what you said. We do understand that the times are very difficult, and therefore doing these things is going to be quite difficult, but there will be some significant decision-making coming up in the near future, so that some of this actually is really applicable sooner rather than later. I think that's why we were a bit concerned. The Marches Partnership, I was going to say exactly the same thing, not that I have meetings or any of that, but actually rural is rural, whether you're in England or Wales. And yes, it was applied to England, but actually, if you look at Powys alone, Powys is even more rural than we are, and they have similar problems. So I would hate that to have been lost, and thank you, Leslie, and I'm sure that will be picked up, because it does need to be moved on, because there are so many cross-border issues that poor old Rachel gets me telling her about all the time, that actually come back to health and social care and sharing services cross-border. So, yes, we did know about the mental health commissioner being, I think, not being appointed permanently, but it was the 12 months plus that worried us.
Well, please don't worry about that, because it's permanently in our programme. It's just a question of doing it as and how we can.
I think the other thing that I'd like to raise is that when you do achieve these things, and if we could just have a bit of an update so we know where we are, especially with the Marches Forward Partnership, especially with various other issues that may come up, so that we know where it's gone to, and actually that then feeds into joint HOSC in its own right.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. And I think it's interesting how that you say, you know, I don't have meetings, but actually one of the ideas for the Marches Forward Partnership in the next sort of iteration of it is to involve more members from different authorities in small working groups. So believe you me, if there's a small working group for this, your name will be the top of the list. I can promise you that. Thank you very much. Thank you, Cecilia. Okay, so moving on to, now this is where it gets slightly complicated. So now moving on, we're going to take item 11, which is the estimated collection fund outturn for 23-24. Councillor Gwilym Butler.
Thank you, Leader. It's Councillor Gwilym Butler, portfolio holder for Finance, Corporate Resources and Communities. The report shows a projected outturn as deficits for council tax and non-domestic rates for the year ending 31st of March 2024 and how they affect the budget for 24-25. The estimated council tax deficit is just over 1 million, mainly due to an increase in the bad debt provision and a lower rate of new properties entering the tax base. The deficit is distributed to the major precepting authorities according to their current year demands and precepts. Shropshire Council's share of the deficit is 0.835 million. Further to the finance peer review, the council stretched its assumptions on collection rates and new properties to reduce pressure on revenue budgets. Where the previous cautious approach led to collection fund surpluses in recent years, this has changed to a limited deficit which will affect revenue budgets in 24-25. In relation to the business rates, there is a deficit of 5.269 million, largely attributable to the increase in the appeals provision for the appeals raised against the 2023 rating list. The deficit is attributed to the Secretary of State and the relevant precepting authorities according to the current year demands and business rate payments. Shropshire Council's share of the deficit is 2.777 million. The current challenging trading conditions are likely to have contributed to an overall increase in the level of appeals being presented, which must be reflected in the projected financial position. It is not anticipated that all appeals will be successful, and it is expected that the provision in future years will reduce to the benefit of the general fund revenue budget. The report recommends to note the overall collection fund estimate deficit of 6.285 million and its distribution to note Shropshire Council's share of the deficit of 3.612 million and to note the inclusion of the deficit in the 24-25 budget also on today's agenda. I therefore move the recommendations, Leader.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Butler. Do I have a second for that one, please?
Yeah, Councillor Ian Nellens, portfolio holder for Climate Change, Environment and Transport. I'll second.
Thank you. Okay, I don't have any hands on that one. All those in favour? Thank you. So moving on to item number 12, which is the Treasury Management Update, Quarter 3, 23-24. Councillor Gwilym Butler.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Gwilym Butler again. The purpose and scope of this report to provide an update to the Treasury management activities of the Council in the third quarter 23-24 and highlights the economic factors that influence the decision. It also reviews the performance and compliance with the Treasury management strategy. I'm very pleased to report the internal Treasury team achieved a return of 5.28% on the council cash balances, outperforming the benchmark of 0.09%. And this actually generated an additional income of £16,290 in the quarter. However, council cash balances are expected to reduce due to the use of reserves in the recent years and the ongoing capital investment programme. I've got nothing more. It's mainly just housekeeping, Leader, so I'll just move the recommendations.
Thank you very much. Do I have a seconder for that one?
Mark Jones, portfolio holder for Growth and Regeneration. I'm happy to second it.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. All those in favour? Thank you. Moving on to item number 13, Financial Monitoring Report, Quarter 3, 23-24. Councillor Gwilym Butler.
If you can just bear with me while my computer catches up with us. We're getting there slowly. The wonders of technology.
I should take more time introducing the item next time, Gwen.
Thank you, Leader. It's Councillor Gwilym Butler again on the financial monitoring Q3 23-24. This was discussed at length at scrutiny last Monday. I'm not going to spend too much time going through that because I think we spent about an hour on it last Monday. The headlines are savings achieved to the 31st December of 39.8 million, which is 77.4% of our target. And I'd just like to put out a huge vote of thanks to the staff in achieving that. I've been on this council now for 14 years, and that is the biggest achievement in any one year that I have ever seen. And our heartfelt thanks go out to the management team and everybody involved and the staff in doing that. However, we are also seeing spending pressures of 28 million in demand-led areas, and which is featured in the report, and we are actually putting one offset reserves of 20.5 million to reduce that. There's an overall forecast for the year of an overspend of 14.5 million budget pressure. I am working very hard with my finance officers next to me to get that down, and I am fully aware of the position that the effect that has on the general fund balance and the reserves. But I am also exceedingly confident in the fact that as part of our plan moving forward, that on the 1st of April, those reserves will be major repopulated up to about 30 million. So, you know, it's close, difficult times, but we are in control and we have a plan to move it forward. Furthermore to do, I'm just going to move the recommendations as set out in the report, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Do I have a seconder for that one?
Cecilia Mockley, Adult Social Care and Public Health.
Thank you, Cecilia.
Thank you, Chairman. This is concerning, this report, because as the portfolio holder has said, at the end of Q3, overspend £14.5 million and against the general reserves at that time of 16.2 million, which actually at the end of Q3 leaves the council with its general fund, if it was the end of that year, with just £1.63 million in it. And I note also in the report, and I could go through it more, but we did go through it at scrutiny, but I think Cabinet need to be aware, and it is being recorded and watched, that the highway saving in the report is just under £1 million. That is work that was not carried out on the highways, which was budgeted for. To me, if that work had been done, and there are many comments on the media and elsewhere about the potholes and the state of the highways, if that money had been spent, the reserves at Q3 would have been down in the thousands of pounds. It is concerning, and it is a risk this council is facing, and it will be returned to later in this agenda and maybe at council when we're looking at the financial strategy for next year. If there is a plan, was the plan expected to bring the reserves down to this sort of level? It is a calamitous level, not a level where any council with a net spend of nearly £300 million with reserves of 1.63. I understand the pressures on the council, but if there is a plan, what is the plan? Because this shows that there isn't at this moment in time.
Thank you, I think. Councillor Evans. Councillor Buckley.
Thank you. Julia Buckley, Leader of Shropshire Labour Group. We did discuss this report at length in the scrutiny meeting on Monday, and just to reiterate our thanks particularly to the finance team and to those council staff who have done the hard work of delivering these savings of nearly £40 million in one financial year. But the problem is, the other half of the story is that while that hard work's been going on internally, there's been this external pressure of another £28 million, mainly in social care, whether that's children or adults. And the questions we were raising on Monday is, how can we better understand where that pressure comes from? Is it that more people are knocking on the door, so more people need our help? In Labour, we would say because they're suffering the effects of the cost of living and 14 years of austerity, so more and more people are falling out of the net. Or is it a different reason? Is it that the complexity of their need, that more and more people have got more complex combined issues that is more expensive to solve? Or the third possibility, is it because this council has outsourced so much of its service delivery that where you have demand-led pressure, we are at the whim of the private sector who can put up their prices, and so it's actually the unit cost of that care that is producing this massive increase week on week. And we talked about, could it be a combination of these three? Which of those three is at play at the moment? Because actually, we need to understand which of those factors is prevalent before we can start talking about the right plan to solve this. Put simply, our staff have done the hard work. Our staff are now at risk of redundancy because costs in the private sector are crippling this council week on week.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's unfair to regard that as a party political broadcast because the point is very, very clear that in terms of addressing the pressures, we have to get behind the word pressures. You know, we know we absolutely understand that there are significant pressures, but we're not being told the full story as to what those are. The population is ageing, the population is getting sicker, but you can't account for a change from a £26 million budget shortfall, which we were asked to fill as opposition councillors some 2 months ago. Then suddenly it's 50 million, and now when it comes to the papers for next year, we're looking at trying to solve a 62 million gap. In other words, those pressures, the rate of change of those pressures is such that it isn't accounted for by people getting older. They're not suddenly getting older quicker. They're not suddenly getting sicker quicker at that rate of change. Something is going on out there which is producing a significant acceleration in the pressures. And the most likely explanation is the cost pressures, the unit cost pressures, which are as a result of being dependent on a market out there, a market largely outside, large parts of which are outside Shropshire. Now, to be honest, it's slightly rich of Julia and the Labour Party to simply put it down to that, because we know that neither the Conservatives nor the Tories nor Labour actually have taken on the issue of social care funding as a national issue. Still not said in The Guardian yesterday, in The Observer yesterday, you know, both parties are effectively ducking this issue at a national level. But at a local level, that doesn't let us off the hook at the local level. And at the local level, we have to take seriously, and we have to unpick, and we didn't get an answer at scrutiny. It would be good to hear an answer today. We have to unpick exactly where those pressures are coming from so that the solutions we put into the budget going forward, and in particular into the capital budget going forward, which we will get to talk about later, are the right solutions in order to shift the way we spend money and in order to reduce those pressures, which are most likely, it seems, to come from the market out there rather than from the more gradual change in demographics.
Thank you, Councillor Dean. Councillor Morris?
Thank you, Leader. First of all, I'd like to join with Councillor Buckley in congratulating the £39.8 million worth of savings that have been achieved, largely without any notice or any impact on general services that have happened around here this year. And that is just a phenomenal achievement. I think we just need to, you know, really reflect on that. Councillor Evans specifically mentioned highways and a £1 million that hadn't been spent on highways. I have to say, Councillor Evans, every time that we try and put a highway scheme through in your wards, automatically you throw your hands up in the air and say, oh God, we can't, excuse me, I'll withdraw that, goodness me, we can't do that because of the impact. So we are there trying to spend this money, Councillor Evans, and I've got a very recent example which you know about, which you've effectively pulled because you've said that we can't get it done and you've created that. So all of a sudden we can't spend that money, and that's planned time, planned expense, planned officer time, going to get that done, and it's just been pulled. So you're going to find out that places in your ward where you complain about places not being done, you're just pulling them all the time for political gain. Moving on to sort of adult social care and health, and just the thought that you can save money by bringing it in-house and not having... I mean, where are all these people that we're going to bring in-house and do it cheaper than we've got now? I mean, there's clearly loads of them. Councillor Buckley obviously knows of loads of them that we're going to bring in and do and make all these savings. I'm just going to wind up by saying again, congratulations to Councillor Butler and the team, James Walt, for producing all of these savings at no notice to the general public this year. It's just a fantastic achievement.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Morris.
Chairman, as I was mentioned, can I make a reply on that? I purposely didn't do individuals, but I think this does need a reply because of what was just said.
One sentence, Councillor Owen.
The work that was done was to close the main road between Hanwood and Pontesbury at 11 days' notice. At 1 week's notice, Minsterley motorists were told they would not be permitted to run buses through it. No one knew about it was coming through. The notice that was given was diabolical. I said in my replies, I agree and support the work, but wanted to sit round the table to see how it was done. The alternative route involved vehicles going into Welshpool and then into Bishop's Castle.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Point taken. Councillor Motley, and then back to Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much, Chair. It might be helpful if instead of all this political flim-flam that seems to be going on at the moment, we actually had a look at why we are seeing increasing demand in adult social care. And I would say, although I don't want to take words out of Kirsty's mouth, in children's care as well. First of all, our population has been going up. It's increased by 5.7%. So now we have 323,600 people as at the last census, up from 306 in 2011. There's been an increase, a large increase, 29.5% in people aged 65 years and over. And we know that they are the age group that tend to need social care. There's been an 18.8% increase in people aged 66 and over living alone from 2011 to 2021. There's been a 115% increase in discharge activity over the last 3 years and continued pressure. I have to say that our teams have worked tirelessly on the issue of discharge from hospital and also at placing our residents in appropriate accommodation, whether it be at home, I'll get onto that in a second, or whether it be in care. We also have a situation where people are presenting with increasingly complex problems, and dementia plays a large part here. We've got, again, stealing from Kirsty, we've got more looked after children transitioning into adulthood. Once that happens, costs inevitably go up, looking after adults with serious learning difficulties. And as a result, we've seen a large increase in numbers aged 18 to 64 needing our care. And on the whole, they need residential care, perhaps more than others. The problem with Shropshire is that everybody loves it. It's a good place to retire. It's been a good place to retire for ages, ever since I first became a councillor nearly 20 years ago. Even then, we were struggling with the fact that housing was being snapped up by early retirers. They're now becoming rather more elderly. So, as a result, and as you know, thanks to increases in medical care, we have increased life expectancy. So, as a result, I mean, there are other reasons, but that gives you a flavour of why we're struggling at the moment. And I have to say that I'm absolutely astounded by the work that our teams are doing in order to mitigate this. One of the other issues which we've been concentrating on, and it's been very effective, is in increasing the domiciliary care market. You may recall that we put an extra investment into the domiciliary care market last year. It's paid dividends in that we discovered that an awful lot of people would much rather be dealt with at home than they would have to go into a care home. And I think we do slightly need to destroy this myth about the fact that we're absolutely full of very rich private care homes charging enormous sums. We actually have very few private care homes that charge enormous sums or that are part of a chain. I think we've only got 3 or 4, which is in a huge contrast to what probably goes on in the southeast. Most of our care homes are small. They're very often family run. They are catering very much to the local communities. So could we just please get over this point about it's the wicked capitalists who are basically charging us all until we're skint, because it's not very helpful and it's not actually accurate. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Councillor Motley. I suppose the point I would like to make is that when we talk about, you know, what are the issues, why have we seen this increase, the chances are, and we've had discussions around this very recently, it is a mixture of all those things. It is a mixture in the number of people coming into care. It is a mixture, without a doubt, there is an issue of cost pressure from the unit cost. But on the other hand, you know, we will be harangued, no doubt, at some point in the future for the amount that we're looking at raising those cost packages for our social care and adult care, children's care providers. I think the other thing that I always try and point out is that when we talk about adult social care, 50% of the money is actually spent on 18 to 65-year-olds. So when you've got children in very, very expensive placements, those children, when they turn 18, become very expensive placements for adult social care. And, you know, medical advances has meant that, you know, they are with us for a considerable amount of time, and that's great, isn't it? But there is a cost to us. I think the other thing around complexity is I was talking to somebody at a meeting only yesterday where they were saying that the impact of COVID on our... How do I put this? The section of the population that is already suffering with a number of conditions, COVID hit very hard, which has meant respiratory issues on top of those. So the complexity of those cases becomes more and more difficult and more expensive. And when I come back to Gwilym, I'm sure he will explain how we've got from what we thought was going to be a £23 million overspend, budget deficit for next year to the figure that we're at. But the point I will make is the demand we're seeing now doesn't suddenly just disappear on the 1st of April. We have to look at that demand going forward. Councillor Butler. No. Go on, one.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you for the points that have been raised. I'm not going to go over what Councillor Motley's thanks, but I thank you for your intervention on that, on the adult social care. I think it's really useful information, and there is obviously a mixed arena there. I'll go back to Councillor Evans's point that we didn't have a plan about inflation and demand. Well, actually we did, and that's why we put money into reserves. And if we hadn't put those money into reserves, we wouldn't be where we are now as a sustainable council moving forward into the next financial year. And I would like to reiterate, back in January, I saw nothing from the alternative budgets around inflation, increase in demand, and what they would do if there was an increase in pressure, because there was no way that they were putting huge amounts of money into reserves to actually cover that foresight, should it occur or come out of the wardrobe, so to speak. So quite interesting there. It's also been a bit fortuitous, Leader, that a few months ago, helping out Councillor Motley, I retook out the communities portfolio. And part of that, I addressed the Voluntary and Community Sector Board and looking at the work that they're doing. It is not just us that have these financial pressures with inflation and demand. It is whole of the sector. And it is not just, as Councillor Buckley would put it, the greedy capitalists delivering care. It is all those thriving voluntary and community sectors across Shropshire who we are very proud of that also have those pressures. And as far as I'm concerned, while I'm in charge of this, we need to support that sector. And if we bring more and more back into house, that sector will wither and die. and they are vibrant in their own community, so I can't go along with that one, I'm afraid. I'm sure we're going to have further debate when we come to the budget leader. I'm just going to move the recommendations on the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. So I have a proposer, I have a seconder. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to give you a break now, Gwynam. So item number 14, performance monitoring report, quarter 3. Councillor Rob Macy.
Councillor Robert Macy, portfolio holder for culture and digital. Gwynam might not like to hear, I'll keep my introduction brief. So this report sets out obviously the performance of quarter 3 for the 23-24 financial year. It continues to show the development of the KPIs which we've been taking forward to support the Shropshire plan. Currently outstanding now, we are down to, it was confirmed on Monday, 6 KPIs to build around. Obviously that's not to say that that is the end of that journey, although scrutiny members heard on Monday that there is sort of an ideal number that supports this and a bit of a methodology behind this around the number we sit at. Obviously it continues to develop across the organisation, internally as well. We had a scrutiny meeting on Monday at which 2 new KPIs were suggested to be developed, supporting the statements that have just been made around social care to understand that further and the pressures. And those have been accepted and taken away to be worked up. The report itself in front of you is produced by exception. So you'll see that there's 12 items on there. Doing the maths, that says 87% of the KPIs are on target or within tolerance, and 13% of them have been reported in this report. The fact that they appear in the exception report doesn't necessarily mean they are below target. It can mean they are above target as well. So with those that are in the report, obviously you've got the portfolio holders in the room, should there be any specific questions on those. And with that, I'm happy to move the recommendations in 3.2.
Thank you, Councillor Macy. Do I have a seconder for that?
Councillor Chris Cofield, Planning and Regulatory Services. I second the report.
Yeah, thank you. Can I just say, Rob, how so much easier it is now to actually look at the KPIs and see where we're going on this. And can I also say thank you, or can you thank the people that are doing the dashboards? Because the dashboards have made such a difference. And if members, I'm not suggesting members around this table don't look at them, but I'd certainly say to all our other members, please look at these dashboards because they do give you an awful lot of information. Councillor Evans?
Thank you, Chairman. As the portfolio holder says, it was discussed extensively again at scrutiny. And there's just one item I wanted to bring up today because some of the different portfolio holders around the table, and given my history, I would expect that I would bring it up today, and that's the street lights and the LED conversions. There have been assurances given to the Cabinet previously that it would be done last winter, that it would be done this spring. It now says that it will be done in June. I would like reassurance that it is, because any street light conversion actually saves this council money, revenue money, which we really, really need. And I see in the KPI, it's 84% when the target was 88. And can I join you in congratulating the production of the KPIs? It does make it easier, and it's far more simple to actually view them. And the progress continues together with myself and the chairman of the transformation scrutiny looking at these, and if anybody wishes to have more KPIs put in, I'm sure the portfolio holder would do his best to put them in, because it is this which tells us how the council is doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Morris, can you talk about street lights at all? Or will you come back to Councillor Evans on that?
Can I come back, please?
Okay, of course you can. We'll get a response to you for that, Councillor Evans. Councillor Buckley?
Thank you. Yes, we discussed a couple of these indicators at scrutiny on Monday, where we look at those, what we call exceptions, those which fall below the targets we're supposed to achieve. And the one I was most concerned about is the number of educational health care plans, so ECHPs, that are issued to children and families within 20 weeks. So 20 weeks is a 5-month wait. And currently Shropshire is achieving 32.3%. So 1 in 3 children with special educational needs who are asking for support. 1 in 3 will get their reports made after 5 months, and 2 out of every 3 are having to wait much, much longer than that. We often hear from this administration, and particularly from the Portfolio for Children in Education, how we're all about early intervention to prevent children ending up in looked after care. Special needs children are not the same as children in looked after care, but there is a huge overlap between the two. And the earlier we can help these children, the better outcomes they will have, and the more money this council will save. So when a family is coming to us asking us for an ECHP, that is their cry for help. And this council should be absolutely prioritising responding to that. We should be front-loading our resource at this end of the equation, rather than having to mop up the huge numbers of children going into looked after care. We have 770 children in looked after care, one of the highest in the country. I want to see us being the one that achieves the highest rate of ECHPs. I want us to be helping them right at the start of the problem and not at the end. If you look at the graphs, if you look at this KPI, this isn't a new problem. This number has been falling over the last 6 months. So we need to understand, why are we failing these children? Why have we been failing them for so long? And what resource are we going to put in to get this right?
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Councillor Hurst-Knight.
Thank you, Councillor Kirsty Hurst-Knight, Portfolio Holder for Children Education. There is no correlation between the amount of EHCPs issued and children looked after numbers. So initial snapshot on Monday, because I believe the scrutiny action was you were going to write to me, so I've got the data ready. We'll not go into specifics. As you can imagine, legally in a public meeting we won't ever threaten or divulge any information we can't, but happy to talk to you outside of the meeting. The HCPs that we issued in 2024 to support children, 6.2% were actually looked after children. So I don't know whether you're getting a little bit confused with the PEP, which were at personal education plans, which are at 98% delivery, good quality. So happy again to talk to you again outside of this meeting. So yes, we absolutely have grown capacity in the team. We work very closely with the DFE, as you know, and NHS England. We're not the sole contributors to the EHCP, but we have done a lot of work, growing capacity in the team, and hoping that that KPI will soon reflect all the work that has been happening. Thank you.
Thank you. Have any other questions? So I have a proposer, I have a seconder. All those in favour? Thank you, Rob. So, moving on now to, and I apologise for flitting backwards and forwards, item number 8, Financial Strategy 24-25 to 28-29. Councillor Gwyn Butler.
Thank you, Leader. It's Councillor Gwyn Butler, Portfolio Holder for Finance, Corporate Resources and Communities. Before I start the report, I'm just reminiscing of previous years, and I have to say I'm pleased I'm not hearing the echoing around the room of lack of transparency, lack of detail. And again, I give great thanks to the finance team, because if anybody doesn't know what's going on with the finances in Shropshire, everything is laid bare in this report. And it couldn't be more transparent of the history, where we're going, what we're doing, and the plan. The report presents the budget plans for Shropshire Council 24-25, including 56 million spending reductions and 6 million demand reduction measures. The report aligns the Shropshire plan with the financial strategies for revenue, spending, capital investment and treasury management. The main drivers and challenges of the budget is driven by the needs to balance the increasing demand for services, especially social care, which we've just talked about, with the limited and uncertain funding sources. The budget also faces challenges from inflation, cost of living pressures and the impact of COVID-19. The proposed spending reductions and their categories go into 6 types: reduced cost, target operating model, managed demand. Roger will be able to tell us what the demand's going to be in 3 months' time, so we'll be fine there. Charge more, generate new income, and stop-cease services. The report provides a breakdown of the proposed spending reduction by service area and by year. However, I do want to stress that it is not all doom and gloom. The capital investment programme in Appendix 2 sets out the planned capital investments to be undertaken by the Council over the period of the capital programme, and this amounts to an investment of 384 million. And I do understand that general public and others can get confused between the capital programme and a revenue budget, so never the two will meet, because they are different things. This includes 144 million of investment into highways. This is a capital programme and obviously does not include the North West Relief Road or the completion of the Shrewsbury Ring Road. That is something completely different. It's £56 million of investment by this Shropshire Council and Administration into housing, 27 million of including 8 million planned investment into primary schools, and 25 million of investment into economic growth. So this is all in our future plans to actually help the people of Shropshire, and it will have a knock-on to our demands, I'm sure. I'll just mention reserves. Reserves have been used in recent years to enable the council to avoid the immediate impact of cost pressures such as inflation and demand pressure. The plan. These pressures can no longer be avoided, and the proposed spending reductions will enable these pressures to be fully addressed. Reserves provide an important secondary provision against unanticipated costs, including plans which are not fully delivered. This report and the detail of Appendix 1 sets out the necessary planning to ensure the reserves are retained at a safe level throughout the MTFS period. The plan. It also includes, the report outlines the engagement of PwC as a delivery partner to provide capacity, expertise and experience in delivering savings plans. The report also recommends a delegation to the Chief Finance Officer and the portfolio holder to commission specific work from PwC within a framework set out in the report. PwC must generate cashable benefits. Like everybody else, they have to pay their way. All proposals are to be agreed by Cabinet and EMT before being confirmed. The recommendations and synopsis of the report recommends that Cabinet notes the budget analysis and its alignment with the Shropshire Plan, the levels and plans for the reserves and the capital investment programme. The report also recommends that Cabinet approves the budget proposals and the delegation to the Chief Financial Officer for any necessary changes ahead of full council, subject to consultation with the portfolio holder. The report provides a synopsis of the executive summary and the main sections. Paragraph 4.8 and recommendation 8 sets out the proposed delegation to EMT and the CFO to progress the engagement with PwC within a clear framework of costs and benefits. The report also sets out the responses to the public budget consultation, and I'm overwhelmed that we had over 1,000 responses. When I took over this portfolio, we were lucky to get into 3 figures. Last year we had 300, this year we've had over 1,000. And it's those consultations which are now the basis of our plan moving forward. The alternate budget proposals are also included from the opposition groups on the council, and the details of movements from the December MTFS to the February MTFS. And I'm sure Cabinet and other members are appreciating that I'm bringing this to you on a quarterly basis, which has been, I've done over the last couple of years, which has been a first, so everybody's kept updated on a regular basis. To that end, Leader, we'll open the debate. I move the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. I'm happy to second that. I think, well, firstly, Gwyneth, I can remember when I first became a councillor, I doubled the number of consultations that we received that year, because I think it went from 1 to 2. But I am, I'm eternally grateful for the people who have taken the time to fill it in. But I also want to say thank you to the people who devised it, because I think the problem before was that nobody could understand it. This time, it was easily understandable. I think the budget is what it is. We've heard very clearly from both comments that Gwilym and I have made, this is not a situation that we ever wanted to be in. But I think what is very interesting, and you can't switch on the television without hearing yet another council is in a very, very difficult situation. And for most councils, there is one same issue, and that is social care. Some councils have gone too far. Others, like ourselves, are trying to battle through this. It is a very, very difficult situation. And I genuinely mean that when I say not one of us around this table signed up to have to deal with things like this. But this is the situation we're in. So I don't intend to make my budget speech now, and I hope that we'll keep from the opposition leaders, I hope we keep this to questions as opposed to major speeches, because those will obviously take place at full council. But the one thing I would say, and I don't mean this glibly, is that this isn't just our problem. This is everybody's problem, and we need to own that.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not going to make a budget speech, and it is questions on before us now, because hopefully there may be a little bit of an update by the time we get to February. What I was going to refer to is on the recommendations on page 3 of the report. That it's the levels of reserves in recent years, the forecast level of reserves at the end of the current year, and the plan set out to ensure the adequacy of the reserves. I do note that on page 44, it does show the £1.628 million in the reserves added to the 30 at the end of the year, so that in April it's 31 points, but that 1.63 is my real concern. I think everybody's around the table concerned. I do see elsewhere in the report that it is hoped that the general reserves will go up to about £5 million by the end of March, and I congratulate officers on the work they're doing. And I will say about the information that's contained in this, when you go back to years ago, this information is much extended, and I think we all need to say thank you for that. But however, I also want to pick up PwC, and in the report it says PwC is set by a combination of the Cabinet and the Executive team, and in here it seeks to take delegated authority to the CFO and the board, together with the portfolio holder, to set the work that PwC is going to do and decide how to do it. And I also note that PwC is, if I've read it right, £6.2 million next year, up to spending with them £6.2 million. That is a terrific lot of money, and I presume that's in this report because the authority of council will be needed to increase the spend with PwC to do it. So I am concerned about that, and the delegation is given to an officer to, and I haven't, the ability of the officer I've got no problem with, but it's taken it away from the executive team and the cabinet. They have the responsibility how to manage the budget. Really, we need to look at that and say 6.2, and it's there to look at the finances. It's already been referred to that the finances is also the delivery of the services that Shropshire wants and needs. And I do have concerns, and I'll be interested to hear the answer to that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Councillor Buckley and Councillor Dean.
Thank you, Councillor Julia Buckley, Leader of the Labour Group. I would join Councillor Evans in his concern about how much we are paying to Price Cooper Waterhouse, a private consultant. We've already paid them £3 million, and here we're allocating a further 6.3, so that's £9.2 million in total, at the same time that we're putting 300 members of staff, of our own directly employed staff, on redundancy notice. Surely some of our own internal staff can help us find savings. They're the frontline people who know how this place works. I'm very concerned that we seem to be spending money we don't have. But my real question, and I'm hoping for some answers, please, from Gwilym Butler and from Kirsty Hurst-Knight and from Dan Morris, in regards the revised, and I use the word revised, capital strategy. So we've been given updated capital strategies throughout the year, and in the last version, which we were presented with in September 23, the spreadsheet rather helpfully highlighted where numbers had changed. The one here just has some things missing. So could you please help me find, in the capital strategy, where is the investment in St Andrew's Primary School in Shifnal, which previously was down for 0.4 million to build 2 extra classrooms? I'm sure Dan Morris will be very concerned to see that the car park maintenance investment £1 million for his backlog that he was complaining about this week has also disappeared. We'd like to know where that's gone, please. And most of all, Kirsty Hurst-Knight, the Cabinet member for Bridge North, I had a town council meeting yesterday. The entire town council would like to know Where is the £4.5 million of capital investment that was publicly approved, voted through council, splashed all over the media and promised to Bridgenorth to invest in our town centre? Now, perhaps I'm inadequate at reading the document and it's in some extra appendix. So I'd like the three of you, please, to help me find where have those promises, those promised investments, where have they gone?
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Well, two things. I can't answer Dan Morris's question. You might be able to. I'll leave that one with you. But the £4.5 million for Bridgenorth is absolutely in the capital budget. Well, I can't do that. Mark, do you know exactly where it is in there? But it's certainly there because it's not anything that we've taken out at all.
The recommendation is for members to approve this capital strategy, and this priority list does not include it.
Well,
so my concern is, if members today on this cabinet
vote for
you
don't need to explain to me the detail, Councillor Buckley. But what I can tell you is, do you know where that is, Councillor Butler? Is it James? Can you?
If I may, yeah. So this is the overall capital strategy. The capital programme will include the detail in relation to where those lines are.
So basically, the money hasn't gone anywhere, Councillor Buckley. I mean, I know that because it was me that approved it in the first place. So, Councillor Butler, do you want to come back
I would probably believe that, as I stated in my introduction, the 25 million for economic development is probably where the 4.5 million for Bridgenorth is sitting.
Just on a point of order, I need to be very clear about this. It previously sat on this priority scheme schedule at Appendix 2, and it has been removed, and today...
Is that the strategy or the capital programme?
It was the priority capital scheme schedule, which is now Appendix 2, and the problem is that you're asking members today to approve that schedule. So on a point of order, I would like it to be absolutely clarified and noted in the minutes of this meeting that you are stipulating that when members vote today on that schedule, they are also endorsing the three items that I have raised, because they are not written in the report you are asking them to vote for.
Can I ask James a question? James, is this a difference between a capital strategy and a capital scheme programme?
Yep. So, again, the details in the capital programme. The capital programme will be approved by full council. That's where the budget for next year and the budget book will provide all of the detail around what those schemes are. There is no implication in relation to a capital strategy stating or not stating all of the schemes that are currently in the budget.
Yeah, and in the meantime, Councillor Buckley, I undertake to come back to you on... Oh, sorry, no, I've just upgraded him or downgraded him. Mark.
So just to be clear, Leader, so that will get confirmed as the design comes forward with the full kind of business case for your approval. So it does sit in that kind of aspirational list of schemes that are in the pipeline that we're now working up as an officer team. And the budget will probably change from that 4.5 as well as the scheme evolves, but that will then get full visibility as it comes back to you as part of the approval for capital strategy next
on
year.
the three, because Councillor Morris won't have the information to his fingertips, but we might have. But
just point of order again, Chair. The last two iterations of this same report, the Bridgenorth scheme was listed under the priority capital scheme schedule. Are you confirming today, Mark Barrow, that it's moved off the priority list and it's now an aspiration?
Just to clarify, Leader, we have two lists. We have schemes that have gone through the formal decision and approval process, and then we have the pipeline of aspirational schemes, and it was on the pipeline of aspirational schemes, and it's still going through that process before it becomes an approved capital project with a final agreed budget.
Except
so it's
it was
not gone
previously,
anywhere. It's not.
It was previously published
Councillor
on
Buckley,
those
through
lists.
the chair, and I will undertake to reply to you directly on those three items.
And I would like it noted in the minutes of today that that is what members are voting for on a point of order.
I'm being asked questions. Can I at least have a chance to reply? Just to confirm, we talked about the 27.3 million and the 8 million for primary schools. That's where the St Andrews development sits with funding in collaboration with the DFE. Absolutely happening. Programme work is in ready to start.
Yeah, thank you. That's what I mean about the difference between the two.
Thank you, Chair. I have one completely separate question, not about what's missing. My separate question is, in the previous version of this report, we had a line that was called Refocus, Shirehall Relocation Civic Centre. That was in the September 23 version, allocated at £41.6 million. I can only assume it relates to a different title in this version, which is called Development of New Multi-Agency Hub. and this one is now scheduled at 56.5 million. Can you confirm, are they the same thing? And why has the price increased to £15 million in those 5 months, so £3 million a month?
I don't have that information. I'll get that back to you.
Dean does.
Oh, Dean?
Thank you. My understanding, if it's helpful, is that whilst they include elements of the same thing, they're not an exact marry-up of the two projects. So underneath that line, you've also got Shirehall decanting decommission, whereas I believe in the previous report there would also have been a line, I don't have it open in front of me, but I believe there would also have been a line somewhere in there about priming the site. I think that this reflects that we've moved into a slightly more advanced stage, but in terms of has the price increased, I believe, and I'll look to Mark for confirmation on that, but I think that this is just reporting it in a slightly different way and incorporating, say, 90% of that plus 10% of something else into a different project. That's my understanding.
I think part of mine was just to thank the staff that work within the finance team and work with the departments. I think having the fact that we've got the Shropshire plan sitting above and everyone's working towards that, even as the conditions get more challenging and budgets have to be revised, the fact that we can have this certainty and this forward-looking planning does allow services to look at what we're providing, how we can provide them in the future, and work around that, and that does bring that extra clarity and the opportunities to meet with the staff from finance on a regular basis to help support that is helpful as a portfolio holder. So it's just to echo that there's a lot of work obviously does go into the report, but there's a lot of background work that goes on to support it and members, so it's appreciated.
Councillor Dean, did you have your hand up? I missed it. Yes, Councillor Dean.
Thank you very much. I just want to start, I think, by acknowledging something which has only been mentioned in passing so far, which is that what Cabinet is doing is bringing forward proposals, and which will then go to full council next week, which will result in 300 plus people who work to deliver services in Shropshire very possibly losing their jobs. And I think that's horrible and tragic for those people, and it's tragic for the people of Shropshire because that's what they do. They deliver services to the people of Shropshire, and I'd hoped that the portfolio holders and leader of the council might have actually mentioned that in their introductions, and so I want to bring that out because I think we have to acknowledge that that's where we are. And I also welcome the comment about making budget speeches, and I'm sure that next week when we do that and want to put in some political context, that members of the majority party will welcome that part of the discussion and not simply barrack it down. Some specific questions. I have some concerns about some of the detail, and there's so much detail, and I do appreciate the detail, so I'm going to try and bunch them into something sort of general questions. And the first one really is, has the exercise that has been undertaken, which I understand has involved a lot of officers, right across the council, has the exercise asked both the question about making savings, but also the question about, are these savings going to reduce our ability to make subsequent savings or to increase subsequent income? And the reason I ask that is that we are cutting, I see right at the top of the list, we are cutting ecology, which right at the very moment when the government is introducing biodiversity net gain and the possibility of actually income from biodiversity net gain credits. So that seems to me like a risky strategy. We are cutting the climate team, who have assured us on several occasions that they are actually a generator of income for the council and of savings for the council. So in those areas, as examples, I'm just very concerned that we may be cutting areas where we could be making savings. And if we then go back to try and make savings in those areas, what will happen is that we'll end up having to pay PwC to do the work for us because we no longer have the skills in-house to do it. And I think that, again, is a risk of a recurring story, that we are looking, again, at an increase in our reliance, effectively, on external consultants, and that will continue to accelerate through this process, unfortunately, and it will get harder and harder for local people, who work for the council to identify the real opportunities in area to do things better and cheaper. And that I think is a real concern and a real worry of the direction that we're taking in. You've put in something on third-party spend, and you've referenced the idea of doing it sustainably, which was what the Green Group had brought forward, but it's unambitious. We're looking at 1.5 million saving over, I think, something like 250, 260 million pounds worth of third-party spend. So I'm concerned that seems to be such an unambitious saving. But then on the other hand, you look at the highways spending, and there's actually no saving this year. It's all put forward. It all goes into the following year, where there's a 2 million saving put into 25-26, but there's nothing identified for 24-25. So those are concerns. The next bit is to do with capital, and in a way, I absolutely take Graham Butler's point that people sometimes deliberately confuse capital and revenue. In a way, it's a shame that they aren't two separate items on the agenda, so we could actually get into a bit more detail on them. But the thing that strikes me about capital is that we have got, under the main headings on page, whatever it is, page 157, we've got chunky amounts in the highways capital budget, 37 million, although interestingly, nothing under environment and transport. So that's all presumably for car-based travel or rather, none of it is actually effectively about sustainable transport. We have chunky amounts in the corporate landlord budget, £15 million. We have chunky amounts in economic growth capital, 12 million. When it comes to adults and children's, where we know that actually looking at future savings, at transforming those services, at bringing, whether it's in-house or in-county or whatever, however we want to describe that, but making sure that there is provision that is more sustainable, we're down to 300k for adults, 300k for children's. And that's actually a reduction from the previous year. So I'm really worried that our capital budget is still, all about the shiny things and not sufficiently about the opportunities that there may be out there to really get into transforming some of the services and making them more sustainable. Which then comes back to the question of, do we have the capacity, do we have the skills in-house to actually make those changes? Or are we going to end up having to ask PwC to do that as well? Two more points. One is on the North West Road. You wouldn't expect me to go through this without mentioning it. There's a very interesting set of options in there, which are clearly political options. I would be very interested to hear from the Cabinet and from the Leader which of those options is your preferred option, because it makes absolutely clear that one of them is the we won't spend anything option. And I'm also interested in the fact that there's a whole chunk in the report that tells us that you really still can't work out how much the road is going to cost, despite the fact that the LEP told you yesterday that unless you actually get a spade in the ground by January, they're very likely to withdraw their part of the funding for part of the scheme. So presumably, we must be closer to the figures than simply restating the figures from 2017. Surely by now, the people of Shropshire should be given some information on what this ridiculous scheme is actually going to cost. And then the final point is just the impact report, which unfortunately says there are going to be very significant impacts, and then we're going to work them out. And I think when you're looking at 1.4 million coming out of transport for special education needs over 2 years, we know what that impact is. That impact is devastating on some of the most vulnerable people in our communities, and I would have liked to have seen a little bit more upfront detail with regard to these social impact of some of these cuts. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dean Carroll.
Thank you, Leader. Just a quick one in response to Councillor Dean's first question, or first point about reducing third-party spend with an eye to sustainability being an ambitious figure of 1.2 million. Actually, you need to combine the two budget lines of RC085 and RC086. They're described slightly differently, as the first one, I believe, is direct third-party spend, whereas the second one is supply chain, which is equally third-party spend, but is more peripheral to the council's direct third-party contracts. If you combine those together, you see that you get a figure in excess of 13.6 million. So just to reassure, it's not an unambitious target, that actually it just needs to be read in combination with other budget lines.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Carroll. I'd also just like to point out that when I said nobody around this table ever signed up to make some of these decisions, which are heartbreaking, that's exactly what I was referring to, Councillor Dean, in terms of the staff. And I've said it a number of times recently when I've been interviewed. Councillor Butler, did you want to come back?
Yeah, if I could briefly, Chair, because I'm sure the bun trays are already out cooking for next Thursday, next week, so for the fight, so we'll be ready for that one. Just to pick up on a few points, I totally agree with you, Councillor Evans, about the reserve position, and I'm hopeful that that 14.3 million will come down by the time we get the outturn report. But obviously, having the plan in place to repopulate the reserves on the 1st of April it is part of the plan and will give us more reassurance moving forward. I just, and I do totally take Julian's point. There is nobody sitting around this table who would want to make anybody in this authority redundant. It's the last thing I came into politics for. But all I would say to you is, if we hadn't have had a plan and we hadn't made savings of 40 plus million in this financial year, how many people do you think would be going? Because we would be in a horrendous situation. And I would be hopeful that anybody who is affected, we can do whatever we can to try and offset as many of those jobs as we can. But that leads me on nicely to PricewaterhouseCoopers, because we have the issue, we own the problem. What we don't have is capacity and time. And this has to be moved, and has to be moved quickly and efficiently as possible. And I would guesstimate that a lot of those savings that have been delivered of the 41 million were delivered because we had PricewaterhouseCoopers here. And again, I would say that is helping us to save jobs, because we're doing it quickly and efficiently as we move forward. So I did, in my introduction, state that moving forward with PricewaterhouseCoopers, it has to be cashable benefits. Because if it's not cashable benefits that drives our spend down, they will not get paid. And there will be risk with that, and there will be fallout. But if we don't do that, it won't matter how many reserves we've got, we will not be sustainable. But we have the plan, and we are going forward, and that's what we're actually doing. I think that's pretty much covered it. We talked about the capital strategy and capital programme. As the portfolio holder for member development, I think we need to do some training around that, especially for new members, to actually understand how you get into the capital strategy, how you build a business plan, and then it gets into the capital programme once we know how much it's going to cost and what you want. So I'll take that away. I'd like to just move the recommendations, if I may, in section 3, the 3.1 to 3.6, the Cabinet notes, and the 3.2, 7 and 8 that recommends the recommendations to Council. Thank you, Leader.
Well, just that my questions have been answered. I specifically asked whether some reassurance that we're not cutting up our nose to spite our face when it comes to the opportunities that might come out of the climate team, the ecologists, all that sort of thing, and also whether we think we've got the balance right in the capital programme, where we've only got 300,000 in adults, 300,000 in children, whereas we've got millions upon millions in highways and in corporate landlord capital budgets.
So the first point around have we got the right balance? There's been a significant amount of work on this, not just around the cabinet table, Julian, but around with officers and ADs and service managers. So those decisions have been taken by us collectively. The second point I would make is that we have, and Councillor Hurst-Knight can correct me, but pretty much on average once a year we are opening a new facility for certainly our children. Is that?
Hopefully more than.
Okay. I know that that is something we're doing, but we're doing it in bite-sized chunks because it's important that we get that right. And as you know, all of the ones that we've currently done are rated as outstanding. And as far as the adult social care capital bill goes, that's actually a policy thing. Our policy at the moment is not to have in-house provision. So capital provision is more about, I imagine, genie and things than actually buildings and things. The other thing I just want to say before I come back finally to Gwilym is that I did note that in the task and finish group, from the financial task and finish group, there is a specific recommendation around PwC. And I think it's interesting that the specific recommendation that comes out of that is recommendation 2, and it says that the council continues to develop its work with PwC as the transformation partner, tactically utilising their access to skills and knowledge of the council, skills and knowledge that the council does not have in-house to help transform services, which is exactly what we're doing. And if I'm right, Councillor Evans, you chair that group, and it's your recommendation. Councillor Gwilym Butler.
Just to sum up, and I do apologise to Councillor Dean for not coming back to him directly. Difficult times, Julian, and I'm more than happy for you to come out and to provide me with alternative savings if I do not change those recommendations. It's all very well to say don't cut it. So if you don't cut it, what are you going to cut? Where are you going to get the money from? That's all I'll say.
And if I just join
and then we have the political debate.
There's been a lot of that going on, let's be honest,
so,
regardless.
Difficult times. None of us want to be doing this.
No. Okay, so I have a proposer, I have a seconder that we send this through to council. All those in favour? Thank you. Moving on to item number 10, or is it 9? Sorry. Item number 9, Treasury Strategy. Councillor Gwilym Butler.
Oh, sorry, I do apologise. No problem, I'll start again. Councillor Gwilym Butler, portfolio holder for Finance and Corporate Resources and Communities. The report Treasury Strategy for 24-25, again, it's a housekeeping report which we bring forward on an annual basis and ask you to agree with the plan and the rules for the money, including a delegation to the Section 151 officer to arrange to borrow money and pay back loans as they see fit, based on the best economic advantage. I'm not going to go into great detail, Leader, and I just actually move the recommendation as set out in item 3. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gwilym, do I have a seconder for that?
Councillor Dean Carroll, Cabinet Member for Housing and Assets, formally second.
Okay, I have a proposer, I have a seconder. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. So, moving on to your last item for today, I think, Gwilym, item number 10, which is fees and charges, which will also go through to full council.
Yep, bear with me 1 second. Thank you, Leader. Councillor Gwilym Butler, portfolio holder for Finance, Corporate Resources and Communities. The fees and charges, the proposed fees and charges for 24-25. The Council receives income from 3 sources: local taxation, government grants and fees and charges for services. The fees and charges represent 86.863 million of planned income in 23-24 and are proposed to increase to 98.525 in 24-25. The document sets out recommendations for fees and charges levels for the council services in 24-25. It should be noted that the total level of revenue income generated from fees and charges is due to the combination of the level of transactions and the value of tariff applied. So a single £3,400 transaction will generate less than 1,800 transactions of £2 each. The report and the attached schedule of proposed charges sets out the tariff only, which members should be aware of. You will note also in the report that there are some discretionary budget lines where it is currently showing a 0% increase. Those budget lines are still currently being worked on, and there may be amendments on those budget lines which you will receive before full council. So just be aware of that. There's not many, but they are still being worked at with the assistant directors, etc. I also wish to add a further recommendation, and this is based a bit of what Julian was saying, and the outcome from the consultation, which actually the general public were far more minded to put fees and charges up rather than reduce services and protect staff. So I've taken a much more holistic view over the fees and charges, and personally I don't think it's right that we look at this every February. We need to be looking at it on an ongoing basis on supply and demand, and if we need to change things mid-year to increase demand, or if things have been going exceedingly well where we could charge more, we should be actually looking at it on a more regular basis. So to that end, I have another recommendation to add, and it is to review the total estimated income from different fees and charges items, to identify which items generate the most income, and to consider whether the benchmarking already undertaken for those sources of income is placing the council in the upper quartile for charges based on comparison with similar local authorities. This will help ensure that we protect staff by maximising our income. And maximising our income is one of the core strategies we've got to do to obviously maintain our sustainability, but obviously try and offset some of the impact on the staff. So I will put that forward as a further recommendation, if I may, Leader, and I move the recommendations as set out in the report, and obviously this will be coming in full to full council anyway for further debate.
Thank you, Councillor Butler, and I note that there may be some slight changes between the two. I'm happy to second that. Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Julia Buckley, Leader of the Labour Group. I think what's important about this report, although I appreciate this updated news that the fee increases we thought had been kept at 0% actually are just pending, so that is quite a change. The majority of charge increases here are around the sort of 10% mark. And we referred to this, didn't we, Councillor Dan Morris, earlier this week when we had the car parking call-in scrutiny. As you may recall, this Cabinet tried to increase car parking charges up to 67%. And the point that we made was that that was completely out of kilter with all of these other price increases for other chargeable services. So I'd like this group of people, this Cabinet, who will be asked to look again at those price increases on car parking, just to bear in mind that this report in front of you shows you what the usual level of price increases are, and to try and keep car parking in line with other services that people use. Thank you.
Councillor Morris.
Thank you. So there is a report from Scrutiny which will come back to Cabinet in March, and then a report will then come back to April Cabinet. So there are 4 things that the Scrutiny asked us to look at, and I'm sure that's what we'll do. On the wider point of the fees that were proposed that aren't currently in here, I think we all realise that the council in general, and I'm not referring to anything specific, we need to raise extra money, and the money that will be raised from parking fees, and parking fees will go up, that will be used to go back into the service. And I think those are points that were very eloquently made by the Assistant Director, Andy Wilde.
Yep, thank you, Councillor Morris. Councillor Butler.
Thank you. I've only just got one comment. So what I'm hearing from Councillor Buckley is she wouldn't like fees and charges to go up to support staff and keeping staff in the organisation.
I have not said that, Chair. I may respond.
No, you've just responded, that's fine.
No, he's referred to me by name, Chair.
Yeah, but you've just responded and said that's not what you said.
I clearly did not say that. I said that...
That's the implication. If we can't get the income, we can't keep this up.
Councillor Butler, you can't put words into my mouth as much as you would enjoy doing that. These fees are 10% and the car parking was 67%.
Do we have a chair in this meeting or not?
I did ask if I may respond to
yeah,
the
but
accusation.
I don't think I answered.
It's factually incorrect, Councillor Butler. Try to stay within the...
But the implications are such, are they not? However, moving on. I don't have any other hands. I have a proposer. I have a seconder. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Buckley, you may sit back in your chair. Moving on to item number 15 now, which is the draft independent living and specialist accommodation strategy. Councillor Dean Carroll.
Thank you very much, Leader. And we're finally onto something that isn't talking about numbers and figures, and we can give Paul Gwillem's voice a rest. And hopefully we can give Councillor Evans and Buckley's voice a little bit of a rest as well, unless they want to chime in and support the wonderful work that's been done in drawing up this draft strategy ready to go out to consultation. Now, this strategy, the draft independent living and specialist accommodation strategy, takes we always start from the point of the Shropshire plan about healthy people, about healthy economy, healthy environment, healthy organisation, and then we split out into various other area and sector specific strategies, and then this actually ties those back in together in a very specific purpose for delivering the right accommodation solutions for those in greatest need. And it pulls in strains not just of the housing strategy and the local plan, it pulls in strains of the adult social care strategy and even children's and health documents as well, feeds in from the joint strategic needs assessment and from our health colleagues. So this brings disparate threads from across the council back together into a deliverable strategy for this specific purpose of delivering accommodation needs for the most vulnerable in Shropshire who need that support. Now, the actual draft strategy is attached at Appendix 1. It's not actually that long a document for the weight of subject of which it covers. It is a very important one. I really hope that everybody's taken the opportunity to read through it. It does align with and deliver against all four of the priorities, all four of the healthies of the Shropshire plan. And it does it in a forward-thinking way that will improve the life outcomes of the people in need of those services. We are at this point going out for consultation on it, so we're not asking for it to be signed off as a finished document, and we will, as always, take any feedback that comes in from the consultation and try and make sure that we improve the document in respect to people of lived experience making those consultation feedbacks as they come in before it's then finally put to Cabinet and Council for approval and implementation. So we do only have one recommendation here. It's recommendation 3.1, and that is to approve an 8-week consultation period. So I propose recommendation 3.1, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Councillor Carroll. I have a seconder for that one.
I'm happy to second that. It's a very good piece of work, and we need to help these people as much as possible. And I think trying to use some of our own resources to fit them in, it would be excellent work. So well done.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chairman. I was going to sit this out because it is a good document. But after those comments at the start, I will point out, and I had noted it, in 5.1, implications, approving the strategy for consultation has no direct financial implications. Each project associated with the strategy will be subject to its own spend, contingent upon a thorough business case evaluation. I am concerned at that because the vulnerable there, they won't return any and the savings made to this council. And then later on there at 5.5, which I'd already highlighted, it says the draft strategy recognises that capital funding will be essential for the construction, development and adaptation of additional accommodation, including supported housing schemes. And I look forward for positive finances to enable this to go forward. And it's just not only the business case, we need this, and that's why I was going to sit it out. It is a good document, but it does need finances behind it, and I hope that we can do that. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Carroll.
Yes, thank you. I welcome Councillor Evans' comments. In terms of 5.1, it is absolutely right and normal that every project is individually assessed on its merits, and that the costing of each is put through a rigorous process so that we can be assured that we're getting best value for the money that we invest in this, so that it can stretch as far as possible. So I have no concerns that will hold any projects back. What it's saying is that as projects come forward, as each project comes forward, and this isn't one single project, as each project comes forward, it will be assessed on its merits, business cases drawn up, as is the case with every other capital project that the council undertakes, and then delivered in accordance with the project management plan. In terms of, it was 5.5, wasn't it, the capital funding? Absolutely. What I would draw your attention to, and it was perhaps remiss of me not to, under the previous item in terms of expenditure capital in the capital plan on adult social care, is where we have accommodation-based projects, in response to the best practice advice that was taken from both the external consultants we brought in to advise on our housing services, and also the regulator of social housing report back, we now deliver all of those accommodation projects through a housing lens and through the HRA, the Housing Revenue Account, through Star Housing's management, because they're the experts in delivering and managing supported living units. So the £40+ million in this year and the £40 million in the future years for housing investment includes projects like the ones that this strategy aspires to bring forward. So that's to assure that the capital funding and the resources are absolutely there to deliver these projects, and that they will be delivered and managed through the Housing Revenue Account and through and by Star Housing, because they are absolutely the right people to be delivering accommodation-based solutions.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Carroll. Councillor Dean.
Just very quickly, looking at the paper, I welcome this. Thank you very much for this. Just again, it's about this capacity issue really. Within the recommendations in the actual draft report, there are a number which refer to securing funding, attracting funding. Do we have can you reassure us that the capacity exists either within the council or within Star to do that work, that we won't once again end up having to get the skills in from outside, which then means that we are those muscles are withering away within the authority?
Councillor Carroll.
Yes, thank you, Leader. It's a perfectly good question and valid concern to have. This refers back to part of the medium-term financial strategy budget line that talks about capitalising posts. So rather than, for example, grant-seeking officers or officers working on drawing down and accessing grant funding being revenue funded, actually that forms part of the capital expenditure of the scheme itself, if it's able to proceed, drawing down the grant funding. What I would say is we have some fantastic officers both internally within Shropshire Council and within Star Housing at accessing those funds. But in some instances, there will be hyper-specialised skill sets that it wouldn't be economic or even appropriate for us to keep in-house 365 days of the year, because we may only draw down on their skill sets for one project in 12 months, or we may only use for 10 working days of a year. And so, yes, as has always been the case, where that situation arises, we will go out to seek the most skilled and experienced people in those fields. But the general work, that is where, talking about the capitalisation of officer posts within the budget moving forward, that's where that comes into play to ensure that we do still have the capacity in-house to access and draw down those grants to enable projects like these to go forwards.
Councillor Evans, finally.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it's 8.1, the conclusions, I think, on page 103, I think it is. Wholeheartedly agree. Conclusion, the draft independent living accommodation represents a commitment to improving the quality of life for vulnerable populations within our local authority. And then the last few words of it, delivery of the strategy and, most importantly, the well-being of our residents. That's what I'm looking after, and I would hope everybody is doing the same. Thank you, Chairman.
Indeed, I have a proposer, I have a seconder. All those in favour? Moving on to item number 16, which is determination of admission arrangements 2025-26. Should that be 24? No, it is 25-26. You're right. Sorry, Councillor Hurst-Knight. Councillor Hurst-Knight, portfolio holder for children and education.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, pretty straightforward paper, the determination of admission arrangement 25-26, correct years. This is following lengthy conversations, scrutiny, debate, discussions at the local admissions forum, which myself and my Deputy Councillor Nick Bardsley sit on. Thank you for their input. I think it's a real testimony that we are working with schools, not doing to schools, which is something I really wanted to incorporate in my time as portfolio holder. We can see two main changes in the paper, which I'd just like to highlight today. The main change is bringing in the admissions in-year changes, which is a good safeguarding approach and keeps us in constant contact with pupils and families as if we see any movement from school to school. The other change is the PAN, the pupil admission numbers at St Lawrence's in Church Stretton. Both councillors have been briefed and are in agreement. It is something the school want because it will result in 1 year entry rather than split. So they're happy and it sits in line with the PAN numbers for the county. So Rachel is here. If there's any technical questions, I doubt there will be, but thank you, Rachel, as well, because I know you're busy with an impending announcement next week of admissions, so thank you to you and the team on record today. You keep us right up there in national averages and above, no small task, so thank you. Happy to move the recommendations. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Do I have a second of those? Councillor Motley, thank you very much. Councillor Buckley.
Thank you. Julia Buckley, Leader of the Labour Group. What lessons have been learnt from last year, where there were many, many families who did not get their first or second choice of school and they're still travelling many miles to get there?
Thank you. Councillor, we'll bring Rachel forward to the
Rachel
table.
can explain in detail the work that has been going on and the progress is met.
Nice to see you.
Hello, Rachel Reynolds, School Admissions Manager for Shropshire Council. So last year was an exceptional year for pupil numbers. Schools worked alongside officers, as you're aware, to accommodate pupils where possible. The area where there was pockets across the county where there was extreme pressures, and all children were offered a place within their catchment area. Now, there's an issue with Shrewsbury sharing a catchment area for the 4 schools, unlike the rural schools that have their defined catchment area per school. For this year, we are not seeing that number of children moving through the transfer group, we're back to a normal year. So whilst, whilst schools and officers worked alongside each other to accommodate this exceptional year, we don't have this issue moving forward.
Thank you, Chair. Just, are there any more exceptional years coming over the hill?
So we work, at the moment there's been a school place plan review that started last summer. It is being re-reviewed at the moment due to the DFE have released their new yields for the number of house, how many children come out of a housing development. So we're reworking through the data for that. There are bumpy years, they're nowhere near as big as last year was, but we are already working on the strategy to how we will accommodate those children.
Councillor Mark Jones? I'd stay there, Rachel, just in case.
Yeah, Councillor Mark Jones, Growth and Regeneration. Yeah, I'm a school governor, and very much so last year was a big year, and now it's the next problem we're going to have is making sure we keep the schools open with the lower numbers coming through. So, although it was not a nice problem last year, it was a better problem we're going to have. So, get more children born as soon as you can.
Thank you. Kes, can I just ask Rachel a question? You said about the DFE have changed the yields.
Yes.
Can you tell me what that is now, offhand? Or you can do it in writing if you want, but...
I can't. Place planning actually isn't within my remit. Right, okay. We work alongside the place.
Because I always remember it used to be something like 15 out of every 100. Yeah. Is that roughly right?
That was roughly right,
yeah. Yeah, yeah. I just wonder what they changed it to. Councillor Hurst-Knight.
Yeah, it was just to reassure people who have started school place planning, where we work very closely with admissions, and we started the tour of Shropshire, where all educational providers and heads are invited, really open, frank conversations, looking at development in the area and their thoughts and wishes. Is it a separate school? Is it an add-on? So that we're absolutely capturing the educational providers' wishes. So, you know, they're doing it. They know best.
Thank you. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you very much indeed. So I have a proposal for that, and I have a seconder. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. Item number 17, schools. No, I'll start that again. Shropshire Schools Funding Formula 24-25. Councillor Hurst-Knight.
Sorry, Councillor Kirsty Hurst-Knight, portfolio holder for children education again. So local authorities continue to have responsibility for determining their local financial formula. Again, working closely with Schools Forum. This was agreed in January this year in the meeting. They considered the specific arrangements for 24-25 in detail and support the recommendation to Cabinet today. It's again important the length of the discussion, which I know other members in this room sit on the forum, and we looked at the application of the national funding formula and the factors in that. So the recommendations today are that the Cabinet accept the recommendations of the Shropshire Schools Forum on the funding formula for Shropshire schools for the financial year 24-25 for maintained schools and for academic year 24-25 for academies. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hurst-Knight. Do I have a second of that? Councillor Macy.
Councillor Robert Macy, portfolio holder for culture and digital, and I'm happy to second.
Thank you very much. I have a proposer. I have a seconder. All those in favour? Thank you. And last but not least, Councillor Ian Nellens, Severn Valley Water Management Scheme update.
Thank you. Councillor Ian Nellens, portfolio holder for climate change, environment and transport. This paper is for the Severn Valley Water Management Scheme, and this report seeks approval for Shropshire Council to support the Environment Agency, Natural Resources Wales and Powys County Council in overseeing a public consultation programme for the Severn Valley Water Management Scheme and to progress future work for a joint project board. So the officers have been working with the Environment Agency through the River Severn Partnership to identify the approach to climate resilience. This has included early work to inform £10 million worth of government investment awarded to the Environment Agency to progress work on a catchment-based approach to water management in the Upper Severn. Over the last 2 years, the Environment Agency has led the initial stages of the Severn Valley Water Management Project, creating tools and frameworks to develop technical solutions to address significant climate challenges faced by the catchment. The Environment Agency has invited both Shropshire Council and Powys County Council to form part of a joint project board along with Natural Resources Wales. This is to shape the strategic direction of the project and its future delivery. The Environment Agency has requested Shropshire Council supports the first stage of public consultation. This will focus on providing opportunities for partners and members of the community to comment on the objectives of the project and to provide feedback. This consultation will set out the approach that will be taken to ensure future identified options are both engaged upon and assessed against environmental, social and economic needs to enable maximum benefits to be achieved through future delivery. The development will test nature-based responses to climate resilience. It will allow for understanding of how appropriate engineering can be used to complement the wider natural process. It will help harness the natural and cultural value of the upper River Severn as the headwaters of UK's longest river system. It will provide the catalyst for community resilience and economic prosperity in the face of climate change and natural emergency. It will help provide a strategic framework for supporting landowning communities to understand the value of environmental management within farm businesses and enable testing of new financial mechanisms for delivery. The Shropshire Plan recognises the climate change challenge and needs for urgent action by both the Council and working with external partners such as DEFRA. Developing the Severn Valley water management will improve the natural environment for future generations and secure economic and community resilience in the face of climate uncertainty. I move the Cabinet agree to recommendations at 3.1 and 3.3.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lennox. Do I have a seconder for that one?
Councillor Dean Cowell, formally second.
Thank you, Councillor Cowell. Councillor Julian Dean.
Thank you. Welcome this, support this. Thank you very much. Just hope that members of the Conservative Party around the room will distance themselves from some of the slightly crazy ideas coming out from sections of their party regarding the abolition of the Environment Agency and Natural England and giving all those powers back to the Minister. Clearly we need independent advice and regulation of our environment to make sure that the environmental standards that we are trying to move towards are actually properly enforced and upheld.
I have a proposer, I have a seconder. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. That brings us to the end of today's Cabinet meeting. The next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, the 13th of March 2024. Thank you all.